Welcome to Politely Pushy. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Eric Chemi, Politely Pushy. Politely Pushy. I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Welcome to Politely Pushy, folks. I'm your host, as always, Eric Chemi. Today, we're talking with my colleague, Tomio, here at Bospar. Funding news. So many startups, they want coverage for their seed round or their Series A or their D or whatever it is, right? There's so much money at stake for them, but from the media's point of view, it's often not big enough to matter, right? The story matters more than the money in a lot of cases, but for every company, that's their big moment, right? It may not be the media's big moment, but it's their big moment. So Tomio is going to be here to talk about how do we make that happen? How do we get that kind of coverage? And Tomio, I guess I'm so excited. I'm losing my voice here today. So excited to talk about funding news. So I'm going to let you do all the talking today. So we can hear all your insights. Cause I mean, we hear it all the time, right? There'll be some company, hey, we raised $8 million. I want to get on the Wall Street Journal for that, right? Or I want to get in Fortune or Forbes or whatever it is. And you've worked at places like that. And it's, that is going to be a lottery ticket kind of thing to be able to get that coverage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 5-10 years ago, it was a little easier. You could count on certain coverage from a lot of outlets, TechCrunch and others. If you had funding of any legit kind, you could count on it. But today, the media has changed. Obviously, there's less reporters, there's less bandwidth, and just more focus on what does that story actually mean, as opposed to just the funding. So yeah, it's on the one hand, funding is really important and it's really meaningful, and often some of the biggest news a company will put out. But on the other hand, like you said, it's there may be 10 companies that day putting out $8 million funding news. So which of those 10 am I going to write about? I can only do one today. So that's often the dilemma.
Why can't you work harder as a journalist? Why can't you write about all of them? Why can you only do just one?
Well, I'm a reporter and I want to write a really good story. I want to write a 750 to 1,200 word story that's really great about this company for the company's sake and for my sake, because I want it to be a really good story. And I just don't have the time to write 3 stories.
Yeah, that's pretty long. Yeah, these are not little short one paragraph. Oh, Tomio.com just raised $8 million. Here is the investor. You want to actually do a much bigger, thoughtful piece.
Right. I mean, you could get a listing in Axios or Wall Street Journal newsletter of, hey, I raised funding. It's one line, but it's not a story. But right, we're talking about an actual in-depth story about what's the history of the company, what do they actually do, why is it meaningful, how's it going to change the world, all those things.
Do you feel like there's a size number that, okay, if you're above X, you're more than likely going to get coverage? Is there some sort of like scale of number of millions equals this percentage that you're going to get on? I assume if you raise $1 billion, 100% you're going to get coverage, right?
Yeah.
There's some scale from 1 million to $1 billion that's going to get you.
Yeah, there's a scale. I mean, you go on Twitter, you'll see certain reporters say, if it's less than 100 million, don't bother. That's from a Bloomberg.
Less than 100 million raised or less than 100 million valuation?
Raised.
Okay.
And then $1 billion valuation also is a pretty good, a reporter will say, oh, I have to at least talk to this company and probably will have to cover it. If it's under 100 million or less than $1 billion, it's possible, but like I said, then you're in the realm of, is this a good story? And is this a good story to me as a reporter?
And then how do you balance, hey, you should try to get an article with a reporter versus just do a press release because no one's going to pick it up, or do both, or do the article, wait for that, then do the press release, or try to time it? Like, how do you balance their owned content versus their earned content?
Right. Well, that's where we get into the exclusive versus embargo, or exclusive versus press release, that whole discussion, which is a lot of the discussion you have with funding news and any news. A lot of startups want Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, TechCrunch to cover, but a lot of those outlets will only cover if it's exclusive. So if you really, if you as a company really have to have it in Wall Street Journal or have to have it in Bloomberg, then a lot of times we'll talk about doing an exclusive with that reporter that you're targeting. And it doesn't mean other outlets won't cover it, but you just want to ensure that you get that one hit and you get that in-depth story from that outlet. But there's also other cases where you don't necessarily have to have that one outlet. So you may want to just do a press release or may just do an embargo and have everyone come out at the same time. You may not get as in-depth a story because the reporter will feel like, well, I'm going to do this story, but someone else is going to do the same thing. So why should I put as much time into it? So that's the trade-off you get. My feeling is reporters will cover it, won't care if someone else is covering it, if the story is either A, big enough, it's 100 million, I feel like I have to cover it, or it's the company is big enough, say it's OpenAI or it's Anthropic, I have to cover that funding. There's no question. There's no debate. Or it's a topic that's, say it's agentic AI, and I feel like I have to cover that because that's the news.
But there's so many companies. There's so many companies that are doing agentic AI, right? Like so many companies, but they're tiny, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing if you're Anthropic, OpenAI, fine, but this is the, you know, Tomio's agentic AI company, and we just raised 23 million. We're now worth 150. Is that getting coverage? You know.
Well, does it relate to something I just wrote about in the last month? Maybe I'm writing about agentic, but only in medical records, or or insurance, or whatever the topic may be. So it's got to be targeted to me as a reporter, or it's something that's really not just, like you said, not just agentic, but something totally different in agentic that's we haven't seen before.
Do you ever advise people on? Do you ever advise clients, say, hey, look, I was that reporter, right? I was that reporter you're trying to reach. I would never write about this. No one's going to write about this. But here's another tactic. Or do you find that, hey, there's always going to be a way? There's some way we can get that story in earned media.
There is a lot of times there is a way to get coverage, but sometimes it's not the funding. Say it's a $5 million funding round, Series A, or even 10 million. And it also depends on the investor. If it's Andreessen or Sequoia, that's different from maybe a smaller VC who I've never heard of. That doesn't mean anything to me. But so say it's not a top name investor and it's 5 to 10 million, then you have to say, okay, well, what's the larger trend that this story plays into? Maybe it's not about, you thought it was about agentic, but actually it's about tariffs, or actually it's about healthcare for women, or something, some other topic that's more timely. So that's where you have to figure out what's the context of the story, why does this matter, what's really pressing about it, and this funding could be de-emphasized, and you could throw that in there and say, hey, we'll also give you this funding news, but what's really important is X. That's a lot of times what happens.
What about the different stages, right? Sometimes we'll say, hey, we're coming out of stealth, right? We've been working on this. We're coming out of stealth. We want to announce some things, but we had already raised the money before, but now we want to talk about it because now we're out there, but we didn't actually raise it right now. You get a lot of those kind of weird nuances. What do you say to those people?
Yeah. So that's a really common thing. And it's, for a lot of reporters, that's great because you want to see write about a company that's never been written about before. It's totally new. It's totally interesting. Maybe the founders are really interesting, or the topic hasn't been done before. So that's often a good strategy. Sometimes you can take that too far and say, try to keep things too, close to the vest. So some cases you may just want to be a little more open and say you have something that maybe you have some news that's ready to go out, you might, some cases you might just want to do that instead of waiting 6 months to, come out of stealth. But a lot of times the stealth is good, and so you're offering maybe the seed funding or the Series A funding, plus they're coming out of stealth. So that's seen as an additional thing. That's not only is it funding, but no one's ever written about this before. It's totally new. That's kind of the offer. One thing to be aware of with that, but also any funding, is the filings with the SEC. A lot of times the lawyers will have to file, and then then the company will want to announce the news 3 months later, maybe 6 months later. But if the filing hits the SEC EDGAR website, and the reporter sees that, and someone wrote about it already, just a paragraph, even if it's just a paragraph, and then 3 months later you offer that, and the New York Times will say, hey, sorry, someone already wrote about that. That's not exclusive for me anymore. So that's you have to be careful about that and talk to your lawyers.
What's your advice about that whole filing thing? Because not everybody has to file. I guess it's like certain number of shareholders or size or something. What is the rules on that? And how do you advise companies to say, well, don't sort of burn your opportunity to announce yourself because you wasted it and that showed up in a filing and then now it's over?
My understanding, and the rules are a little, as I understand it, the rules are a little squishy on this. But my understanding is you don't necessarily have to file in all cases, but there are some cases where you do have to. But even if you do, the timing is squishy also. So say that all the deal is finalized, you don't necessarily have to file with the SEC on that day. Some companies feel like they have to, but others will wait until they're ready. So there's ways you can slow down the actual SEC filing, even if the deal is completed. That's how I understand it. So my advice is to try to do that if you are going to go this stealth exclusive route.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that companies do in trying to get coverage for themselves? Is it putting a filing out there, for example? Is it expecting too much? Is it withholding too much information? Like I think about companies who say, oh, we want to announce our funding, but we don't want to give any information. We don't want to give any numbers. We don't want to give, we just want to say that, Andreessen and Sequoia and Kleiner invested in, like, that's it. I don't want to say anything else. You're like, okay, well, how big or small is it? What's the valuation? What, all this stuff. But what are the most common big mistakes you see companies make?
One basic one is just the timing. Sometimes it's, we really want to have it out before our product launch, or we want to wait until this product launch. But then if you want it, sometimes you want to get it out really fast, and then there's other reasons why that's a problem, either because there's an Apple launch on that day, or maybe it's right the Tuesday after Labor Day, and or the Tuesday before Labor Day, and no one's around, or those kinds of things. And so that's one just basic
thing. Does the day of the week stuff matter? Because you hear people talk about, like, oh, don't do Mondays, but Tuesday's the new Monday now, so it's got to only be on Wednesdays, but Friday in the summer, and you're like, well, then there's no good day. What am I supposed to do? Like, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I don't think there is. I don't adhere to that too much. Most people like Tuesday or Wednesday because they think Monday is too busy with public company news or M&A. I tend to not agree. I basically just say don't do it on Friday.
So you say Monday or Thursday's fine, just avoid Friday.
That's my personal feeling. I don't think people
like reporters are not there, or because they're already busy and they're catching up with other stuff, or
on Friday. Yeah. It's not just that. It's also that the kind of long tail. Like if say you put out the release on Friday, it's fine. You may get one story, but then by Monday, when everyone's back, then people may have forgotten about it. Whereas if you put the release out on Monday, and then someone who wasn't able to do it Monday can do it Tuesday or Wednesday, and it won't feel that old. But if you do it Friday to Monday, that feels old.
But does anybody still do stuff a day or two later, or is it like I was always in a world where, oh, you don't get it on the first day, it's over?
Actually, there will be some. Yeah, there will be some because say maybe it's in biotech today, and I really covered biotech only, and I saw, oh, there's 20 million, $5 million biotech, but that's what I cover, so I have to cover that. So I'll do that on Wednesday, because that's my beat. If it's not your beat, then forget it. But those are cases where
I see.
Yeah.
What other mistakes do you see companies make?
I think making just the messaging, making sure you're really good on the messaging. A lot of times when you're coming out of stealth or seed or Series A, you have a good product. Sometimes you have a good business, and there's product market fit, and you're starting to grow, but you never really done messaging because you never had to. You just got customers, and you started to grow really fast. You had a growth marketing team or whatever it was, but you never really did messaging because you didn't have to. And so, how do you talk about what you actually do? So making sure that aligns with the news messaging, maybe some industry, what's happening in industry context. So there's several different things you want to think about to make sure everything's aligned, and then also make sure that aligns with your sales and marketing messaging, which you're developing. So that's sometimes want to put the cart before the horse and let's put this out next week, but we've never talked in the meeting before, we never did messaging, so then we don't know what we're saying.
Yeah, we do see a lot of companies where we have to help them figure out, okay, well, what are you doing? How do you describe it differently from what's already out there? Let's say, especially in AI, it's a lot of AI startups right now, right? Like, okay, you can't just say I'm an AI startup. What is that? Right. What am I going to do with that? Right? That doesn't help for at least the media's understanding of what they're going to write about.
Yeah. And sometimes that's both the technical explanation to the reporter. Like, so are you saying you simply just use ChatGPT in the office, or is there something deeper there, right? What exactly do you mean? And then there's also the messaging, like how does this tie into the larger narratives of, well, what's happening with OpenAI with their latest model, or what's happening with DeepSeek, or open source, or various different things that are happening in the industry. So how does this relate to those larger trends? In addition to what does your product do and that kind of thing.
What about the advice on financial disclosures, right? A lot of people don't want to give away anything in terms of numbers. So how do you advise them on, well, the more you give away, the more coverage you're going to get. The less you give away, then no one's going to talk to you. So do you want the coverage, or do you want to just be secret?
Yeah. I mean, as a reporter, obviously you want to know more. You want to know the valuation. You want to know the revenue. You want to know the growth rate. Maybe the, are you profitable? Net profitable. So companies often don't want to release any of this, which, fair. But like you said, the more you can give, the more, this is more just general, not even just financials, but transparent. The more, I feel like the more transparent you can be, the more coverage you get, the more interest you'll get. And the more you'll feel like, the reporter will feel like you don't have something to hide. If it's sort of like, well, we can't say anything about our growth. We're like, how do we know you're growing? So a lot of times we'll say, well, we grew, 75% this year. We're like, okay, that's great. But from what, from where?
We had 4 customers and now we have 7. We had 3 more.
Exactly.
We grew 75%. What am I going to do with that? Yeah.
Right. But you can, I sometimes will suggest, well, can you at least give like, what's your customer acquisition rate, or what's your, margins, or, can you give something that's maybe not as, you don't think is the crown jewel, but at least explain something about your business. So that kind of explains what's actually happening. The other thing is, sometimes companies don't want to give the valuation in particular because they're worried like, oh, well, we'll be seen as lower than our competitor, or maybe the next round it won't be seen as growing enough, or there's a lot of those reasons they don't want to. But if you get big enough, it's if you're OpenAI or if you're Anthropic, or if you get big enough, the valuation is going to be out there, eventually. So I kind of feel like at some point you should just put it out there, because if your company is good enough and you're big enough and you're confident enough, you should just do that. The employees are going to know, they're internally, because they ask. So why not?
There's a lot of ifs there. If your company's not big enough, and if you're not confident and you're not sure you're growing, so then maybe there's good reason to be like, maybe we shouldn't say anything, because we're just kind of stringing this along.
Yeah, but then what's the point, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah. Do you find there?
I'm going under the understanding that you are, a great company. So why not talk about it?
Do you find there's different strategies as you move up the ladder, Series A, B, C, D, and so forth? Like, do you find that you need to do something different in terms of how you're working with the media or what you're trying to present?
The seed and Series A is oftentimes a little more of the vision and goals of changing, disrupting this industry, this market. A lot of times you can talk about the founders and why they're really interesting, where they came from, how they met, the origin story. Whereas Series B and C are a little more about the proof points and the growth and the customers and how they're leading in that industry. So it's a little different. And then the types of coverage, the good thing is for Series B and C tends to be a little easier to get the reporter to say they're interested, because they've probably heard of you already. You've gotten to a certain size where they feel like, oh, this is something we have to cover. So it tends to be a little easier in some sense when you're at that a little bit later stage to get coverage, and you expect a lot of companies will expect more coverage. We don't need to, they already know that. So.
You mentioned earlier, a lot of reporters like to be the first to talk about a company, right? Oh, you're coming out of stealth, like no one's heard about you before, all this kind of stuff. But I also saw a lot of times the opposite. Oh, I don't trust you. I don't know who you are. I don't want to be the person getting burned as a reporter, because it turns out you're the next Theranos or FTX. Although they were a lot bigger, but like I don't want to be some small little scammy company. I don't want to be first. I want you to get some other coverage, and then I can at least show my boss they already got coverage. How do you find those different kinds of personalities in terms of reporters, that some were actively looking for the first and others are actively avoiding the first?
Yeah. Or they're looking for the Theranos, FTX. There was one called IRL. I don't know if you saw recently, that was recently, the CEO was indicted. So, sometimes reporters like to write about companies that they think are, somehow a scam.
Like I was first. I knew something was fishy with those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. The person who uncovered Theranos, obviously he is famous now, but in any case, yeah. So there's different a lot of report. That's just to back up. That's why reporters will ask for those proof points, because you say, well, I got 10 million users. And I say, well, how do I know that? Because IRL turned out they had 95% of their users were fake. So, but so that's why.
So how does the company prove that? How does it, like, if they say, hey, we have 10 million users, prove it. Like, well, I don't want to share. Like, how do you advise a company to prove something to get that reporter on board?
There's analysts. If it's B2B, a lot of times analysts can speak to that, because they've actually looked at the product and they know that it's legit. For consumer product, a lot of times there are proof points already, whether it's being used at maybe it's being used at a hospital, or maybe it's on social media. So that in that case, consumer products I think are a little easier. Not to get the exact number, but there's a little proof. Yeah, for enterprise B2B, a lot of times it's customers and case studies. So you'll see that often also results in great stories if you have a customer who's willing to talk about it and talk about the benefits of that product. So that's to me that's great, especially for the later stage. That's a real winner.
So you probably need to present the reporter with all these different data points on a platter, ready to go. Hey, I'm pitching you this idea. Here's an analyst ready to go. Here's a customer ready to go. Here's some proof points. It's not just they said they have a great product. They said they've got 1 million users.
Yeah. Oh, and then the big one I didn't mention is the investor. So the lead investor for Kleiner or Sequoia, and they're willing to talk to you and tell you what they've seen. They've gone through the whole company. They've talked to customers themselves personally. They put their money behind it. So that to me, even if I haven't seen the exact numbers themselves, I say like, well, at least so and so from Founders Fund told me that this is legit. Doesn't mean it can't be faked, but at least I believe them because they've done their due diligence more than me, obviously. So I trust them, or it would be even better if I know that investor. And sometimes companies will do this. They'll ask their VC to write the intro, to write the pitch, or to send the pitch, because the reporter knows that investor.
Right. And then that's a much different kind of pitch coming from the investor than, let's say, coming from you, or coming from the PRH, or coming from the marketing person, or the startup CEO, something like that.
Yeah. And some investors will do that. Not all, but especially investors that are they know how this works and they're hustling and they're trying to help their companies. They'll do that if to help them out.
Yeah, I was going to say, what does the investor get out of it? Right? What does the investor get out of that coverage, and what does the company get out of the coverage? Like, what's fundamentally the goal here? It's like, okay, this transaction's already happened.
Yeah.
So what? So what that we talk about it? So what that some non-customer that reads about this, what are they going to do? Like, okay, Tomio's agentic AI got $20 million from Eric's investment firm. So person C reads that. What do they care?
Yeah, there's different reasons that the company, first of all, the CEO and the leadership want it. Some cases they'll want customers. So sometimes they see it as direct, acquisition, customer acquisition. If it's in, CRM today, and they see that as drawing traffic and customers. Some cases it's hiring. We just raised 10 million. We need to hire new engineers. They want recruits to see that they were in the Wall Street Journal or TechCrunch or something. And then there are cases, I know personally that there's been cases where they want to raise the next round. So say they raise the seed, and then sometimes they'll hold it for 6 months until they're ready to raise the A, and then they'll release it and then use that news to say, because a lot of times investors will see that and say, oh, that looks like a hot company. I'll email the CEO right now. So they know that inbound's going to come when that TechCrunch story hits. So they'll use that as a fundraising kickoff a lot of times. So there's a lot of different reasons. And sometimes it's just for internal morale and ego for the company, But yeah, it's a lot of times it is I guess the big thing is it's seen as the one surefire news hook for a company, even if it's, like we said, even if it's not, that's one of the best chances you have to get coverage. So if you don't get it with that, then you have to wait another year or two, and then
right.
Who knows?
Then you actually do something interesting, which is a lot harder.
Yeah. And then for the VCs, I was just going to add, for the VCs, for them, it's inbound for them too. They want people to know, hey, we're investing in agentic.
Oh, like, so we're in that space. Yeah, I see.
yeah, then we're the lead on the hottest agentic in medical or something, and so they can also send that to put that on X or wherever, so that founders will see that and be like, oh, I should go talk to that VC instead of the other one. So they see that as leads a lot of times, and also just helping their companies, like they want to be seen as founder friendly, helping their portfolio companies.
What about other kinds of fundraising, right? Like we saw SPACs, safes, like all this other stuff. Like, what does the advice change for things like that?
Yes and no. There are different, especially when there's the market's hot and there's a bubble. There can be creative financial engineering, as you know, whether that's crypto, whether that's SPACs. We saw the SPAC craze, which may be coming back again. And safes are just a different flavor of sort of bridge funding. But to me, I think, and companies sometimes may disagree, I think that you should try to be clear about what exactly the funding is. Like, you shouldn't say that a safe is a Series A if it's not, or you shouldn't say that a bridge round is a Series B if it's not, because they will find out later, and that will be bad. So SPACs and other types of those types of creative later stage deals, which also include secondary deals. Sometimes you do a secondary instead of going into the company. It'll cash out employees. I think those can be stories, and reporters will be interested. You just have to kind of take some extra care to explain what's actually happening, and not try to kind of like gloss over them, and that kind of thing. So that's like I said before, my thing is transparency. So just try to be as transparent as you can.
What's your ideal dream type of story that when you were still on the news desk, what would have been most exciting for you to write about?
Well, actually, that reminds me, this does happen in the, what is it, reverse, would you say, where I'm a reporter, I'm talking to people, and I hear that Coinbase or Anthropic or whoever is raising a big new round. I call around and I confirm that, because I'm a real reporter and I have at least two sources. And then I call the company.
It's a little bit of a dig there. Who are you digging at with that?
Subtweeting. No, it's just, that's the way you do it at a news organization, supposedly. So then you call the company and say, hey, I heard you're raising 30 million, and the lead investor is X venture capital. I'm planning to write about it tomorrow. Do you have a comment, or can you confirm or not? And then you, as the company, are in a position of, deciding, do I confirm? Do I talk to them? Do I say nothing? Do I put out a blog? Do I try to front run them?
Now the stories come to them. They didn't even pitch it.
Yeah, right. So if you're a hot company, in some ways that's a good thing, because that means everyone wants to write about you. It's a good problem to have in some ways, even though you're not happy.
Most companies, by definition, quantitatively are not that hot company, right? Most companies are fighting to get that kinds of coverage, right? They would love if Tomio from the Journal is calling them up, right? Mostly it's like, Tomio, can you please write about us? Please look at us, right? So their playbook's very different. They would love anyone to write about them.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But once you get to if you have big investors, even if you're the Series A level, it can happen, because I heard Andreessen is leading this round. Even if it's Series A, that's a company I may want to write about.
Is there some value then for a startup to take on the bigger brand VC backer, just so it increases their likelihood of getting coverage?
Um, I think that's probably one consideration that they think about. Probably not the top one, but it's definitely, I think is a reason that people use, because it's something that people recognize.
Because what about, let's say, and there's a lot of people we know, hey, I started this company. I really believe in it. It could change the world, but my background doesn't have big brand names behind it. My venture capital firms don't have big brand names behind it. I only raised a certain amount of money, 5 million, 8 million, because I don't want to take on too much, because I don't want to dilute myself, and our growth prospects are really good. I don't want to over have investment, right? So
Yeah.
that's all bad from a media story point of view, but they firmly believe, like, I'm going to change the world with this. Please write about me, but this is all I can offer you. This is all I have to offer. What do you help? How do you help them? What do you do with them?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I think that's a very good rationale, and a lot of great companies do that. And you don't have to be with the most popular firms to do that and have a great company. So, so I guess the one thing is, you're building a great company and a great product. That's foundational, right? If you have that, then you're in a good shape, whether someone's writing about you or not. And then it's just figuring out, how can we get good coverage, which we can still do with, you have good investors, even if they're not necessarily the hottest or the most famous. You can still do all these things with those great investors, and even if it's smaller round, you just have to show that growth and show that vision of why you're totally upending this industry. So it's those two things. It's the growth, and then this is why this is totally transformative.
I knew some companies that they said, we're profitable. We don't need to raise any money because we make money. And so we feel like we don't get the media coverage that these other guys get, because they're raising tons of money, but they're raising it because they lose money. So what are we supposed to do? Like, we're not going to raise money. We don't need it, but we're doing great, but no one writes about us.
Yeah. Yeah. That does happen. And, you can still get coverage, obviously, if you're growing and you have those proof points, and people will write about you. The VCs are proof points to the reporters, so that's one thing that's more challenging. But not, you don't have to have a VC to have good coverage. So it's definitely still possible. And VC funding is like one filter that a reporter will use, as hey, I see they got funding, so I'll at least look at it. I may not necessarily write about it, but I'll at least consider it. There may be other filters of, hey, I really want to cover this one sector or this one trend, and so if you're in that area, then they'll want to talk to you.
Tommy, this is fascinating. There's so much, so much going on. It's like hand-to-hand combat, right? People trying to get their word out there, get their attention, trying to get in front of media outlets to say, hey, talk about us. Look what we're doing. We're doing a lot of great stuff. So thanks so much for the time today.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Eric.
Thank you to my guest, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week, and we'll see you next time.